Hello, everyone. So, we are a couple of teachers. Um, I specialize in middle school and high school-ish. I'm actually Miles's full-time remote tutor. Um, and Mackayla specializes in early childhood through kindergarten education and development. So we've got a relatively widespread there. And then, of course, both of us are lifelong learners, people who actively enjoy engaging with increasing our understanding of the world and the breadth and depth of our knowledge. So there are, as we know, the traditional forms of education that are real higher learning. I'm educated. I have a college degree. And there are ways that that is expected to look. Traditionally, you are expected to learn from textbooks and lectures. You sit down and you read a book and you get the information and you take notes, and you go to a lecture and you listen to the information, and it's structured very much like the books, and you write down notes, and then you take a test to show that you've learned it. And that's how education works, right? Except that that doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes there are people with processing difficulties. If you have a lot of trouble with reading words, people who are dyslexic are not going to have a great time getting information by sitting down and reading a book. If book isn't accessible for you, that's not going to teach you well. As someone with auditory processing issues, if someone is talking faster than you're processing, you can lose the thread of a lecture and have to spend time going back to figure out what they'd said. That means you can't be fully listening to the thing they're saying next, and that can get really frustrating. Things like PowerPoints, visual aids can assist with that some, but even then, the standard formations just don't work great for a lot of people. Um, Among other things, as someone with ADHD, sitting in one place listening to someone talk for 2 hours is not always conducive to integrating information for me. I have a lot of notes from college classes where I've got in-depth notes and also doodles in the margins and little comments that I wrote to friends of mine while we were sitting there. And I didn't do well in sitting around discussing seminar periods until I discovered that if I knit or crocheted while we were talking, I listened better. And I checked in with my group at one point, said, "Is it okay with y'all that I'm doing this?" And someone said, "It's actually really soothing for me. Watching you crochet makes it easier for me to listen," which was a wildly great bit of synergy. Um, and then, of course, there's the issue of affordability, right? We have a lot of obstacles to accessing traditional college educations in our society. And time. A lot of traditional learning requires take a chunk of time to do just this, and usually a scheduled chunk of time. Well, if someone's trying to work a job or take care of children or even do other academic things at the same time, that's not going to be accessible to them. There are some traditional alternative traditional learning styles, um, like apprenticeship, right? Go and work with someone who does this every day to incorporate into your brain and experiences the things that they do. Um, there were tutors, right? People would hire a tutor for their children or a governess, depending on age, and they would get that information presented in bite-sized quantities that they were worked with personally over, so they knew how to incorporate things. You go at the speed of the individual. There is the Moana style, I am self-taught, where you just go and do stuff until you figure out how to do stuff in a way that works. And tried and true human tradition there. And of course, there's learning from elders in your community, learning from your parents. Here is the correct way to bake an apple pie. You know, you're not always going to sit down and read a recipe off of the recipe card or out of a cookbook. You learn, and here's the process. There are things about how to cut butter into flour for making biscuits that I didn't learn because I sat down and studied how does one make a biscuit. I learned it because Mickey and I would stand in the kitchen together and she would show me how you cut butter into flour with a couple of butter knives because you didn't have a proper pastry cutter. And now that's the traditional way that I think of doing it. But again, those things take time or the resources of having your community available to do that, or the resources of hiring a tutor, or the availability of apprenticeship jobs. And a lot of those things are difficult to access, especially in our modern society, where we have such a strong focus on doing your contribution through monetarily advantageous acts. And learning isn't usually lucrative. So when the value of time expenditure is in how much you accrue, how much money you make, or how much food you can afford to put on the table, being able to take the time to learn in traditional forms is a privilege. So what are some modern alternatives, right? The modern alternatives for accessing those traditional classroom structures in a way that's less limited by time or less limited by college money. There are educational websites and activities. Brilliant is a fantastic website with very hands-on, you work your way through a lesson set with activities integrated. Miles, actually, I used it as a teaching tool with him. He has done pretty much the entirety of the content of the Brilliant system because he wanted to study science and math and computer programming, and it had access channels for those. There are also things like masterclass, where you watch someone talk about their knowledge in a sharing form that way, or Skillshare, where people model for you different things that you can do. Here is how you do this particular, usually handcraft or like process of creation in that one.
Normally for those, you can have the potential of getting certificates, just like other ones. OnSkill, Masterclass, and Skillshare all have the potential of giving you real world available certificates to continue on to show for work or education that you have taken time out of your life to pursue this education in ways that better your chances of getting more education or proving that you have already taken that time in a way that traditional education can give you a certificate, but it's a little bit easier to put into your lifestyle.
And one of the big reasons that that's easier to do is that all of those are asynchronous. All of those are, here is information that you can access on your own schedule. If you only have time to do half a lesson right now, that's fine. You can do half of the lesson and come back and finish it later. You can do an hour of a class here, and then 3 or 4 days later, when your kid is next asleep for more than 20 minutes, you can do another one. So it gives much more flexibility and much less penalization of busyness than traditional education does. There are also things like audiobooks. I always feel like I'm cheating a little bit when I listen to an audiobook while doing something like dishes or vacuuming, because here I am getting double value for my time. I would not be able to sit down and spend an hour reading when there are dishes that need doing. But I can totally cheat and gain an hour of reading's worth of content while doing the dishes. That's great. And of course, for people who have difficulty with visual word processing, it's nice to have someone else read aloud to you, to have access to that information in a way that your own perception of translating squiggle on page to concept in brain doesn't have innately built in. And so increasing the time availability and format availability of knowledge are two of the major factors going into what we're seeing now in terms of modern shifts in learning.
Especially for those that need a visual aid with their auditory processing. There's things like edutainment, where it's generally a visual education format where you have some form of visual to connect back to what it is, not just the words and not just written or auditory, but something physical to remember, something to actually pinpoint what you were learning with a visual that you can keep in your mind. Things like traditional documentary style generally have that, where they have a visual of the content and it moves through that time frame. There are traditional places to get it. Netflix has a lot of it, but places like History Archives is a streaming service for the History Channel. Back on cable, all of their information and documentaries, some are more entertainment than education, and others are more education than entertainment. So that one you have to take with a grain of salt. But there are others that are strictly educational with the that we're trying to make this entertaining and something to stick in your mind. Streaming services like Curiosity and Nebula are purely for those online that have put their entire emphasis in educating people with a connection to what the visual representation of it is. 3D models of past as it moves into the present, so that you can actually see the representation of what past to present looks like. Visuals of places that they're talking about the history or current events of other locations that you might not ever have gone to or seen or have a mental model of for you to actually connect to and see that they are in a similar place as you, even if they are in a different location and their different issues still are something that is tangible. There are shorter forms than longer documentary style. There are documentary movies, and then there are documentary series, which have episodes on either a long form topic throughout it or variations of topics that kind of cover similar things that are connected between. But there are also YouTuber educators who are very much qualified to educate, but they have done it through a shorter form medium as YouTube. There are educators like Crash Course, which is a very traditional-esque, as if you are in a classroom learning a subject, and SciShow, which is made by the same people, the Green Brothers, who then makes it into more of a someone standing and talking to you, but there's more visuals to actually have it be what you're seeing.
Miles has been doing the Crash Course Anatomy and Physiology lesson set for the past year. And He has pages and pages of notes because they fit into a 10 or 20-minute video, an hour or two worth of lecture content with imagery associated and diagrams and animations. And so Miles will sit there and take notes of here is a term and its definitions, and here is the illustration that goes with that based on representing the movement of blood through the body or what have you. So you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of the density of information transferred.
Mm-hmm. There are also more entertainment with the education side of YouTubers, just like any documentary. Kurzgesagt and Extra History are both animated history and science topics. That it ranges for what you can learn, not just the traditional math, science, literature. There are lots of different concepts between psychology, sociology. Just the topic of existence is one that is brought up a lot, and how you can talk about it and learn from that discussion. Those are based through purely animations with someone talking over what would be just the visuals of the topic. There are also other educational formats like the Washington Post Universe, which is a YouTube channel that pretty much educates on current events of what's going on in politics or what has recently happened in a very trying to be lighthearted format. It is still a serious topic, and it is still something to absorb. Here are quotes from actual people, here are the facts, here are the statistics, but done in a short form, generally a what's called a YouTube short, something just like a couple of seconds to a minute long, not even a full video, of a very serious topic in an entertaining way, so that it catches your attention, you can remember parts of it, but you get the actual facts. And there are other forms like podcasts that have like audiobooks, but for the videos. Instead of a written format, it kind of goes into interview style conversations, things like Factually by Adam Conover or SciShow Tangents, which is by the Green Brothers. And those bring on professionals in those fields that they can talk to about whatever subject is that particular time. But yeah.
So there's a whole other section we were going to talk about relative to hands-on learning and development of, real world exploration of things, and specifically working with children, but also how that cross applies for adults.
Mm-hmm.
And time happened. So we want to make sure people get a chance to talk about their learning experiences and what they find accessible. But I did want to note, you were talking about having visual connections with what you are learning. And here's a nice bit of meta. I was thinking about a scene in My Little Pony, get your education in your education, where Rainbow Dash, who so much ADHD, is having a lot of trouble with book learning. She's like, I can't learn this. I don't understand this. I can't retain this. And she receives a lecture while flying through the air over Ponyville. And she, gets asked the same questions afterward. And she's like, well, why would I know no, it's that. Wait, how did I know that? Because her retention was so much better having been doing a physical activity and having visual associations, that she was able to pull that. And so that's that idea of not just there are other ways of presenting this, but there are ways of presenting this that are just more accessible overall. whether that's time, whether that's money, whether that's the way that you learn. Learning is not limited in the way that our society says it is. There is no wrong way to learn. As long as you are engaging your brain and, and at harm none, do what you will. Probably don't go learn by dissecting people without their consent, right? Don't suggest that. But unless someone's getting hurt, as long as you're using your brain, you are doing it right. And as technology increases, as we become more interconnected, we have access to the accumulated wisdom and knowledge of our entire species. We have so much privilege in regards to what we have the availability to learn. And whether you're getting that through a book that you're reading, there's nothing wrong with traditional forms of learning, or whether you're getting that through a 2-minute TikTok video where someone goes, oh my God, there's this really exciting thing. Look at this picture of this historical document I'm talking about. Whatever way you are gaining that information is valid and valuable, and we get more options for that every day. If any of you have suggestions for alternative forms of information accessibility that you've found useful, or places where something has worked really well for someone you know but totally doesn't work for you, or generally experiences with figuring out learning, we would love to hear about it in the conversation. And if anyone has links to suggested content creators, we will be compiling a list to drop in the church Discord. So we would love to have people's suggestions there as well. Was there anything that you wanted to say, kind of as we wrap up?
We are lifelong learners. If you are existing, you are learning. You absorb information every day by being here and listening to people, by using your body through the world, by having something be a mistake and learning from it, or something succeeding and knowing that you have confidence in the ability to continue to do stuff like that. We continuously learn, and any way that works best for you is something that definitely should be remembered and emphasized.
And celebrated.
Yeah.
Because we are all existing. When we exist with intentionality, we can get the most out of our learning, whatever form we use. So yeah, go learn things. And thank you.
Thank you.